Welcome back to more Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Last time we got through the Acorn Cup, so this time we're finishing the final wave. For this, we'll be playing as Pauline, using our standard kart configuration as always, and lastly, we have the Spiny Cup. The first course is Madrid Drive from Mario Kart Tour. Again, as a city track, I think this one is pretty okay, but it's not one of my favorites. While we go through this, I also wanted to acknowledge some other additions in this patch. For example, there were quite a few balance adjustments to things like specific kart configurations and item boxes. Once again, the time it takes for item boxes to respawn has been lowered. So basically, you don't have to worry about stealing items from other players at this point, because it's so much lower than it was at launch. In addition, you also have slightly increased invincibility times for specific kart configurations after getting hit by an item. There are some other additions too. For example, for the online mode, there's actually the ability to set up rooms and have room IDs, so you don't have to worry about friend codes and things like that for private lobbies. To be honest, this is a feature that should have been in the game all along, going back to the Wii U version in my opinion, but it is good to finally see this, even if it's long overdue. That being said, as much as I'm not the biggest fan of the city courses, I do enjoy them as overall courses. Obviously, in terms of scenery, I don't recognize a lot of landmarks in a lot of these because of unfamiliarity with these regions, but as courses, they are fun to drive through. This course does have a giant wiggler as an obstacle as well, so that's kind of a fun detail. I actually don't know if that's the case in Mario Kart Tour. To be honest, I don't really remember playing this course much in Tour. This was one of the last courses added, if I'm not mistaken, along with Realm Avanti and a couple more retro tracks. One of the final retro tracks was actually Lakeside Park from Mario Kart Super Circuit, and to be honest, I really wish that course had made it into the Booster Course Pass instead of Riverside Park, because in my opinion, with like the lava and the volcano, I find that to be a much more interesting track. Again, I definitely feel like they are saving a lot of courses from Tour, specifically in case they decide to include a lot more retro courses in a potential sequel to this game. But for now, it definitely feels like there are some odd omissions, and again, like Piranha Plant Pipeline being the only Tour original to not actually be added does make it feel a little bit odd, given that all the others, like Ninja Hideaway and Yoshi's Island, did make the cut. So again, it is like the only non-retro course that didn't make it in. And finally, we have this little soccer field we have to drive through. I like how you have the Goombas in the Karibo shoes kicking the soccer balls back and forth, and luckily we actually do have a Super Horn to deal with this blue shell as we cross the finish line of this first race. So overall, that went pretty smoothly. Next, we have Rosalina's Ice World from Mario Kart 7. Another curveball, because again, in the initial course IDs, there was actually a tour course here instead, or at least a blank course implying Piranha Plant Pipeline. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure which I would prefer. Obviously, it would be nice to have all of the tour courses in it, but again, given that it kind of feels a lot like Piranha Plant Slide, I almost feel like this is a more interesting course for the sake of variety. But that being said, I almost feel like this is not one of the better courses they could have picked. As much as I like the ice aesthetic, and it does fit with this being a winter release, I almost feel like there are other courses in 7 from what I played of Tour that would be a lot more interesting, like Wario's Shipyard, for example, which honestly is a very unique course, and I definitely feel like it would have been a more interesting inclusion in terms of like the overall difficulty of the course and the aesthetic of it, because we have quite a few ice levels as is, including in the DLC with things like Snowland from Super Circuit. But as a course, it's fine. I do like having the observatory in the background. You have quite a few shortcuts as well. I actually don't remember I'm pretty sure that there are a couple of half-pipe jumps here in this section that wouldn't have been in any prior version of the course, given that I'm pretty sure Tour doesn't have anything like that, and Mario Kart 7 definitely wouldn't. So again, this is an interesting addition here. This turn here is actually really tight. One cool gimmick of this course is the ice will eventually break away, making it much harder to actually land over here unless you're like on 200cc and can go fast enough to actually land over there. But again, you have this little underwater section as an alternative. So overall, this is a very pretty course, but again, I almost do feel like there would be more interesting courses in terms of overall layout. That being said, again, I do like the winter aesthetic, and I like how you can see like the good Galaxy planet in the background over there. There are a lot of cool details in this course, again, even though this would not have been my first choice. And again, I think it's just a testament seeing this is the last 3DS course being added, comparing it to the very first 3DS course being added, that was Toad Circuit, and how bland and undetailed it looked. And now we're finishing off with this, which is a much more spectacular course by comparison, at least visually. Also, it's worth mentioning that Pauline has never been in a console Mario Kart before. Her only other Mario Kart appearance was Mario Kart Tour, and she was one of the most requested characters, if I'm not mistaken, and with the initial character slots listing only one, there was quite a lot of debate over if she'd make the cut over some of the others that had been console games before, and then they eventually announced, yeah, 4 characters would be added. So in general, a lot of the fan demand was resolved, except with Dixie Kong, who I definitely would have preferred over Peachette, like a lot of the fan base would. Our penultimate course is Bowser Castle 3 from Super Mario Kart. This is a spectacular course in my opinion, and to be honest, even if it wasn't a remake of a Super Nintendo course, it would still probably stand out a lot. Visually, it's really good. It's actually kind of surprising this is only the second Bowser's Castle in this game. I'm pretty sure in the past, a lot of the retro courses in the base games of like Mario Kart Wii, for example, would just include a Bowser's Castle. So it is a little bit odd that it took till the end of this wave to finally get another, and to be honest, I do think this is a really good choice. Obviously, I do have a soft spot for a lot of the other Bowser Castle courses throughout the series, but this one had a very significant makeover, and as a result, it ends up being incredibly impressive. It's a lot more multi-layered in a lot of ways. In a way, it reminds me a little bit of Snowland from Mario Kart Super Circuit, in that they took a very flat course and made it a lot more dynamic with a lot of jumps and changing terrain. We also have a lot of anti-gravity too, which obviously wouldn't have even been in Tour. So again, if you had to choose one Bowser's Castle from this particular game, from Mario Kart Tour, this is definitely the one to pick. Though, to be fair, I think a lot of the Game Boy Advance ones were actually pretty okay, minus like that one remix Bowser's Castle from, I think, Super Circuit, that's just a mess of ramps. You also have this little elevated section here that's actually a lot of fun. I've actually never been able to go all the way across all the walls, to be honest. I can't imagine doing that on 200cc, to be honest. I also can't imagine doing that in Mario Kart Tour with, again, like tilt controls or touchscreen controls. I feel like that would be a nightmare trying to navigate that. We are having a little bit of trouble going into the final lap here. Hopefully we'll be able to get good enough items. That's actually another change. In earlier versions of the game, you could basically camp on a specific item box until you eventually got someone good. So for example, obviously if you're in last place, you get better items, but if you don't get what you want, you can just sit on that item box until you get what you want. Meanwhile, in this final update, they changed it, so if you try to basically sit on a specific item box over and over, you will basically get worse items for it, to encourage actually moving forward and not just like camping until you get like a bullet bill or a star or something like that. So overall, I think that's a very interesting change, and again, a very interesting change for the very last main update. The final course of the Spiny Cup and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe in general is Rainbow Road from Mario Kart Wii, a fan favorite that in my opinion is one of the standout tracks of the entire Booster Course pass. I again feel like the Acorn Cup was a little bit okay, like there weren't a lot of standout tracks, so it was overall pretty solid in general. I do feel like with Bowser's Castle 3 and Wii Rainbow Road, the Spiny Cup definitely is a perfect send-off to not only the Booster Course Pass, but also Mario Kart 8 Deluxe in general, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about that after this race. I do feel like this might be a little bit easier. They might have added some guardrails in some places, but I do feel like it's you're less likely to fall off compared to the original, though they actually keep the burning up effect from Mario Kart Wii, albeit it's very short because, like with every other course, Lakitu will save you immediately, rather than having a fade out as you fall to Earth and start burning up in the atmosphere. But again, they even included that. The music is stellar. Again, it's less iconic than the Double Dash Rainbow Road theme, but I still think this is a phenomenal track. I love how shiny everything looks. In general, the Rainbow Road tracks end up being some of the most visually appealing in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And again, it just kind of has this weird feeling of this being the final track in this game. And again, once more, still being better than Mario Kart 8's actual Rainbow Road, because the Rainbow Road in this game is not that great, but the N64 one is really good in my opinion. I just wish it was 2 laps instead of 1, just to make it a little bit less anticlimactic, because a 1 lap just makes it a little too short. 3 would obviously be too much of a marathon, but I do think 2 laps would have been the sweet spot. Oh yeah, another thing worth mentioning is in Mario Kart Tour, this is actually a 1-lap track. It's basically kind of like 3DS Rainbow Road, where it's divided into 3 segments. Going into this wave, that was actually very lucky, but going into this wave, there was a lot of fear that they wouldn't change that back, and luckily they did. So we do have a full 3-lap track of Wii Rainbow Road. Again, it's weird. It's a game I don't have a lot of nostalgia for, just because I didn't play it that much, and yet this does feel like the perfect send-off to this game. Again, personally, I would have been fine with Double Dash Rainbow Road, but that wasn't even in Tour in the first place. So, in terms of Rainbow Roads that were options, this is definitely the best of the available options. This was actually released in Tour a while ago, and people immediately hoped that this would be how they end off this wave, and lo and behold, it was. But again, it does feel a little bit easier than the original. It's also entirely anti-gravity, which is unique. Very few courses actually are in this game, and again, I do feel like it fits really well given this particular track's layout. And they have added a few of the little boosters, but in general, I feel like it's still fairly no frills. That being said, like, there aren't really many of the little bumpers to speed you up. It's still mostly a pure, like, navigation kind of race, trying not to fall off, hitting all the boost panels and so on. But again, I do think this is one of the most spectacular tracks, and again, a really good way to end off this cup. And once again, we've gotten first place in every race in this cup. In general, I feel like this is one of the stronger cups. It's not my personal favorite, there are definitely some tracks I prefer more than these, but again, you really can't ask for a better send-off to the Booster Course Pass and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe in general. And with that, we've gotten gold trophies in every cup in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. The final main addition in this final DLC, or this final update, is a credit sequence. It's actually very interesting because there was so much speculation about who was actually making these particular courses, given that the assumption was that whoever the main developer at Nintendo EAD probably would have already moved on to something else, and so there was a lot of speculation for a long time over who actually made this. But in general, I love this credit sequence. The song is like a collection of different tour themes remixed, and it's just kind of a nice way to look back at the last 2 years of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. It's a weird feeling, actually, being done with this playthrough, given that the very first video I double-checked was in January 2020, and needless to say, a lot has happened since this series initially started. When the DLC was first announced, it was actually really nice getting an opportunity to go back to it with new courses that I either grew up with and enjoyed, or courses I was playing for the first time, with some of the tour tracks, or tracks from games I hadn't played yet at that point. Again, it's a weird situation having DLC so late, and again, it definitely makes me wonder if, like, the next Mario Kart for whatever next console is coming out, because the next console is taking longer than anticipated, they decide to just kind of extend the life of this game, which definitely feels like a logical assumption or a possibility. But again, it is kind of bittersweet seeing this coming to an end, because of just how long this playthrough has been going on. I actually did the math on it, and it's just shy between the first upload and this upload. It's about 1,396 days, if the math was right. So about like 46 months or so. So just shy of like 4 years. So again, it's an odd feeling finally being at the end of this. In some ways, it's almost a relief to be done with this, not having to like wait for the new tracks to drop and having to rearrange my upload schedule every time. But it's also, again, kind of bittersweet saying goodbye to this game, for my channel at least, because I have a lot of memories of this game. This is now definitely my favorite Mario Kart overall. I have definitely played this one most. I have a lot of good memories of playing this game. And that being said, I am still looking forward to seeing what happens next with the series. By the way, you can actually access these credits if you don't own the Booster Course Pass. It's a little bit weird though, where basically you have to play online with people who do have the Booster Course Pass, and then play these new tracks a certain amount of times, and then when you complete a Grand Prix, it'll swap out like the traditional credits for this, if I'm understanding that correctly. That may be wrong, but that was kind of my understanding of it. Napet's also a character, seeing the little banner on the side, that I'm surprised wasn't added in. Again, Dixie Kong, I definitely would have preferred her over Peachette, though Peachette is an interesting addition to me from the standpoint of kind of like Rose Gold Peach of just being out of nowhere, but again, the credits are winding down. It's been a long journey going through this game, but all good things must come to an end. So thank you for watching, and I hope you'll join me next time for something new.